Hey guys, what's up? So, I know that I had promised the next video would be a review video, finally reviewing the sharpened version of the Flying Phoenix over there. And that is still in the works. It's just, again, work is getting in the way, not only that, but the weather is getting in the way as well. I haven't been able to have decent wet weather to, well, it is wet out there, so not decent dry weather to do the cutting tests that I want to do. But it is coming. I already got half of the video recorded. I just need more footage. But in the meantime, there's some other stuff that I wanted to talk about to kind of get off my chest, so to speak. And if I don't get this out, it's just going to eat me alive. So I guess we're sort of going back to the old school stuff where I talk about things. But even though I know the videos where I just simply talk about things philosophically or politically or whatever don't get as many views, I really would like you guys to consider what I'm about to say because I think it's rather important. And no, I'm not saying this because I want more views so I can get more money. I mean, look, I've been on YouTube since what? 2006, 2007. And we all know this channel is very, very small. I don't do this to be a YouTuber to make the monies. If that was my focus, I'd be doing things a whole lot differently. Instead, I'm running this channel the same way that I always have, as a hobbyist. And I noticed that I get a lot more enjoyment that way. If I was doing this as a straight up job, I would have been burnt out a long time ago. So, anyway, I don't think it takes much, perspective. It doesn't take much perception to notice that things are very polarized right now in the world. And it seems that conflict is alive now more than ever. We just can't seem to agree on anything anymore. And we are so polarized that all it takes is one difference in opinion or perspective to instantly make an enemy of someone. You may share the same hobbies, interests, likes, dislikes, whatever. But as soon as you find out that somebody, say, doesn't believe in a God, or does believe in a God, or happens to be conservative, or happens to be liberal, or likes guns, or doesn't like guns, or, agrees with certain ideological points of view, like, all it takes is one, just one difference, and y'all are instantly at war, because people expect that, well, if you claim to be one type of person, then you need to like every single last thing about that particular stereotype. So if you claim to be right wing, you better like every single last freaking thing that's associated with it. Also, if you're left wing, you better like every single last thing associated with it. There can't be any deviations, despite the fact that human beings are, take one and take the other one, and unless they happen to be boring or drones or something's wrong with them, there are going to be some differences. That's life, but you're not supposed to accept that. Everyone's supposed to remain in lockstep. But I'm not necessarily here to talk about or condemn that, though there's plenty to say about that. Rather, I'd like to talk about where this conflict comes from. I'm sure everybody's got their own particular perspectives on why we happen to be so polarized. What's causing it? Why does there seem to be such conflict on ideologies? Why can't we seem to agree, and why are we getting more and more angry over these things? And I am pretty sure that whatever perspective you give or whatever answer you give, there's going to be a hint of truth in it. It's maybe more than a hint, depending on what your answer is. But what I'm about to suggest is something that I personally think that very few of you, if any, have considered, which is why I'm presenting it now. Where all this comes from, this fundamental conflict, sorry about that beep, this fundamental conflict that we seem to have in ideology, which we tend to break down into either left or right, or liberal and conservative, however you want to put it. It comes from one very fundamental conflict that's been going on since the beginning of humanity itself. Since the beginning of human civilization, there has been one fundamental conflict. One thing which has grown into all the other problems that we're having right now. And I am quite confident. Excuse me, I'll lower the speaker because we don't want to hear all the beeps, do we? I'm quite confident that just about every single last ideological, you know, argument that we're having, every bit of conflict, every disagreement, every problem that we seem to be having stems to this conflict. And what it is the conflict between the hunter-gatherer and the farmer. Yeah, I can see that look. The weird one. What the hell is this guy talking about? Give me a few minutes. Let me explain. And hopefully this will all make sense. Let's consider what's supposed to be like the beginnings of human society itself. And of course, I'm going to have to generalize, otherwise we'll be here all day. We know how my videos can get. Generally speaking, we know that when it comes to human society, we can pretty much boil down that the origins of human societies, the beginnings of our survival, tend to be broken down into what is known as the hunter-gatherer paradigm, where basically human beings were scrounging for their existence. We weren't farming, we weren't in a centralized location, not in a city or anything like that. We were hunting and gathering. Basically, you had people going around hunting small game or foraging insects or however they were, getting their proteins and meats in that way. And they were also gathering, finding grains, seeds, fruits, that sort of thing. And these particular societies, at least from what we've seen from archaeology, tended to be close-knit because everyone had to depend on each other to survive. All the fruits of the hunters and gatherers' exploits would in turn be brought back to the main group. So they weren't hunting and gathering just for themselves. They weren't like, okay, whatever game I get, this is mine. You gotta go and get it yourself. Get your own. You don't get your own too bad. It's a cold world. No, if you were hunting for the group. If you're gathering for the group. And everything was pretty much more or less shared equally, more or less. I'm sure some people can argue for a hierarchy and all that, but there was still enough for people to live off of. And the group, the survival of the group, was considered paramount. And it wasn't just resources that were shared. Everything was shared amongst that group. That's how they survived. That's how they remained close-knit. So living space, the caring of each other's children, discipline, happiness, sadness, all that was shared amongst the group. And I mean everything was shared. Everything. I will let the ramifications of that settle in when you think about it. But I don't want to get into it right now. I'm trying to, quickly go through this, so I'm generalizing a bit. Now, this particular existence, you notice that the individual isn't necessarily exalted. I'm not saying that the individual was completely ignored, but it all had to be about the survival of the group. Everything that, basically everything had to be done for the group's survival, because without the survival of that group, they were going to fall apart. The individual human by himself would not survive out there in the wild. They simply don't have the natural powers or abilities to be able to survive in the wild the same way that the other animals could. The human animal survived via pack living, and thus all their abilities and instincts and drives were pretty much driven by and helped to fuel these group dynamics. And that's why they were willing and able to share everything. It became more about the existence of humanity and the preservation of humanity. And their happiness and survival depended upon making sure that everybody in the group was satisfied in as many ways as they possibly could. There couldn't be any major conflicts or jealousies or anything like that, because otherwise the whole thing would fall apart. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we get the farmer. Now, as we know, or at least I hope some of you guys know, farming could be considered one of the main cornerstones of civilization. Because once you get farming, once you get agriculture, you now have one stable place to get your food. You're no longer having to go out there and hope you find something or hope you catch something. You now got one plot of land where you can pretty much grow everything. Well, whatever you can grow, whatever you can find to grow. You cultivate that land, you grow the right things, you hope that the season goes well for you, and now you have subsistence. Now you have food. Now you have materials, you got resources. And that creates stability. And that stability, if we kind of go forward with it a little bit, can also help to generate wealth, status, power. Because you might be growing things or rearing things or gathering things, collecting things, let's say, from your own efforts of rearing the land that other people need and want. And thus that gives you power. You can then trade for what you want. And you can set depending on how desperately they want what you have, you can set your own price. You can set your own particular goals with it. But here lies the problem. If you got a plot of land, if you got a place to settle in, where you're growing these resources that you need to survive, you have to protect it. This is how you survive. Without it, you're screwed, right? So you got to find some way to protect your property. I hope some of you guys are beginning to see where this is going. This is your property. You can't have anybody just coming in and taking your property. It's valuable. It's worth way too much to just give away. It's worth way too much to just share. You can't just share that without some type of price or contract or agreement. So you have to do what it takes to keep that land away from other people, out of other people's hands. You have to protect it. You have to put fences around it. You have to, find ways to discourage other animals from taking your crops. You have to find a way to keep predators away from whatever animals you might be rearing to provide you your meat or your fur or your skins or your milk or whatever you're getting from it. And you may even have to come up with ways to keep other humans from encroaching on your land. You got to find ways to keep them from forcibly taking it from you. Maybe not just the crops, but the land itself. That means maybe having some other people to help you protect it. Maybe you can, for a fee or a certain share of the crops, allow them to help you work on it and protect it. You protect it, you work on it, I'll give you a share of it. Or if you happen to find yourself a fertile mate, and this is of course going to the men here, because usually the way this example is given, well, let's be honest, it's usually the men running the farm and they got to go out and find a wife. If you can find a fertile wife and she bears you sons who are strong enough to continue to till the land, they can be your protectors. They can be the guys that can help you to farm it, to take care of it, and possibly to cultivate even more land, because the more people you have to do it, the easier it is to generate the resources you need to survive and maybe even trade and put yourself into a better position. This stuff's important. And of course, when it's time for you to die, well, you can't take the stuff with you. See, it's not like the hunter-gatherer situation where it really doesn't really matter. You're not keeping all that much. You're grabbing just enough for the group to survive. No more, no less. But now, if you're in one spot, you might have a surplus. And you have something that can help you generate that surplus. Where does it go when you die? It's got to go to the kids, right? If you have them. But how do you know those kids are yours? Your wife has been faithful, right? This is when she ceases to become someone with her own agency who might be able to sleep with whoever she pleases. She has to be faithful to you. Because if she's not, well, then how do you know that those kids are truly yours who deserve to get the wealth that you have helped to generate? Or at least the generator of that wealth, or at least of that particular way of living. Just the basics of survival. So you gotta make sure that she stays under lock and key. And now, they become a commodity, the mate. One that you can use to allow yourself to generate heirs and to generate protectors and workers. and who also has to remain faithful to you so that you know that the ones that you're getting actually deserve to inherit it. And all this stuff needs to be put under lock and key, needs to be protected. And ownership of all this becomes paramount. And the power to have ownership over all of this becomes even more paramount. And of course, they'll always be trying to find ways to scheme to grab more of that power, to take it from you. Because after all, human beings are rather crafty. And one of the biggest things about human beings is that we're adaptable. We find ways to go around things. So if there's something that we want that's being protected somehow, whether through fences or through trickery or through weaponry, you got to find some way. Maybe you can gather a bunch of people to come in so it's not just not you against the owner. Now it's a whole bunch of you against the owner. What's he going to do? Your army's bigger than his. Now it's yours. Or, better yet, why do you have to do the work? You can go in there and threaten his life and the lives of his children, his mate, and go, look, you generate enough for us. We won't kill you. Maybe we might even protect you from the others. But this is my land now. You work on it for me. And we have the means to enforce that. Here's the interesting thing. In the hunter-gatherer situation, it's all about preservation of the group and making sure that everybody in there is satisfied and happy. That's paramount, the welfare of the group itself. When you're going out there and you're gathering the resources, it's shared amongst the group to keep the group going. So in that sort of situation, the main thing driving all that, the main goal is to make sure that everybody in the group is comfortable. As long as there isn't any conflict in the group, and as long as everybody's comfortable, it can keep going. But in the farmer situation, that's not really paramount. What becomes the main goal there is ownership. Property ownership. That's what's more important. Without the power to own property, without the power to hold on to it and to seize what you believe is yours and to maintain it as yours, the whole thing doesn't work. Because you're holding on to something that's supposed to provide you with substance and possibly more wealth and power. Or at the very least, the means of which to survive and to get along with the others. But you have to maintain it for yourself. It's yours. You can't just allow it somebody else to just come in and take it. That undermines the whole reason why it was put there in the first place. This is your land, so to speak. You're claiming it as your own. The ability to claim that property as yours to be able to do as you see fit and to keep other people from taking it, or to have a means of taking it and then holding on to that, acquiring it, and then saying it's mine, and having the power to say that is mine. That's what's more important. The right to ownership. And that's the fundamental clash. That is the main argument that has been going on since the beginning of human existence. What's more important? Humanity or property ownership? What is more paramount? Making sure that everybody in the group is able to survive and be happy and have enough to live on? Or making sure that the people who are able to gain property can hold on to it? And that the notion of property itself is not diminished in any way, shape, or form. That's the conflict. Every last freaking idealistic clash you can think of at this moment stems from that. And I know there's some people right now who are racking their brains trying to find a way out of this. That's not what it is. If you go back with it far enough, you'll realize that's the fundamental conflict. Do we give it all away? Do we keep it? That's really what it is. Now, I'm pretty sure some of you guys are thinking that because of the way I framed it, I'm trying to make it look like the hunter-gatherer lifestyle is more moral than the farmer model. And while I will not sit here and lie to you and say that, oh, I see both of them equally, because I obviously don't. I happen to see a lot more value and more morality in the hunter-gatherer mentality. However, I would be stupid if I didn't realize the benefits of the farmer model. The farming model is basically what helped to develop the civilizations that we know today. It created a more stable foundation upon which to grow. So many of our modern comforts and our technologies and our ways of thinking were crafted because of that model. Make no mistake about that. There are a lot of benefits to the fact that we went to agriculture. We certainly got a hell of a lot more food because of it. We certainly had an easier way to survive the wilderness because of it. It's a hell of a lot more stable. I'm not going to deny that. Nor will I deny that I've benefited from it. Of course I have. However, there is one big difference between the hunter-gatherer situation and the farming situation. One of them was a construct that helped to develop civilization. The other one is more rooted in our actual natures. Now, this is one that I know some people are going to argue with me on, and this is something that actually deserves to be in its own video. Especially since right now we're at the 20-minute mark, 21-minute mark. But let me just throw this out there. When people are put into a situation where ideology goes out the window, when they're suddenly shocked by something so big, like say when 9/11 happened, or right after World War II when Great Britain was recovering from the war and the cities were bombed out, you know what usually happens? People suddenly forget their differences and just come together without anyone really having to tell them to do it. Whenever some major disaster happens, people are just like, something in them just wants to reach out to help one another. It's all the ideology that tends to get in the way of that. And the ideology usually stems from this whole idea of there's us and there's them. In a hunter-gatherer type of situation, you rarely find yourself in the us or them type of thing. And if you happen to look at some of the findings of, archaeology and what we've seen from the development of human societies, you will find that there was really that much conflict between different human groups. Usually when there's another group, one place, another place, yeah, conflicts may happen, but it was rare. It was more like, hey, who's that? Who the hell are they? Seem interesting. Maybe they're nice. Hello? There's at least some attempt at communication. And more often than not, they were able to get along. Because nothing really was much at stake if you aren't claiming something and trying to guard it from other people. If you're already in the mindset of, hey, you need this? Hey, okay, make sure everybody's got enough. You guys over there, you got enough over there? That's the kind of mentality of that. But now in the farming mentality, you have to have that us versus this is my shit. This belongs to me. Skip it here. Who the fuck is that? You better stay the hell over there. That's what breeds that. But that in itself is a construct, because archaeology in and of itself is a construct. You see what I mean? I'm not saying that we can't find some way to get these different ways of looking at the world to reconcile, but they are a very fundamental way of looking at the world that did come into conflict. And that's never really been resolved. And to make matters worse, we're no longer really seeing things that way. Now we're seeing things in terms of good and evil and male versus female and white versus black and west versus east and all these other crazy abstracts, but it really comes back down to that one fundamental shift from when we used to be hunter-gatherers to people hoarding things. The question that we need to ask is it possible to hoard things for the group? I can go on with this, and I would like to. But I want you guys to at least consider what I just said first before I go down that rabbit hole. Because I think it is very important that people realize that one fundamental core to what is going on right now. That one major conflict between the farmer and the hunter-gatherer is how we got to what we're seeing in the news right now. Some of you guys may think I'm crazy for suggesting that, but I just ask you to think about it. Just think about it for a bit. that's enough of that. I really need to hurry up and finish with reviewing these. So, until next time, catch you guys later.